Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rebel News Live panel discussion on this, a Friday, August 29th, 2025. I'm David Menzies, and I am joined by my co-host, that would be Drea Humphrey in beautiful Vancouver, BC. And our special guests on the panel today, we have political commentator Kirk Lubimov and Daniel Fritter. He is the publisher of the superb Calibre magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Excellent. Not bad. How about yourself?
Thank you for having us.
I'm doing good.
It is a pleasure. Andrea, maybe we should get to you right off the hopper.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome. Oh, welcome to our panelists. I love doing this. For those of you who haven't caught on to what we do on Fridays, and I believe one other day a week, this is our Rebel Roundup. So we incorporate the daily news with two awesome guests, which we have for you today, and it's panel style. And you can be a part of the live stream as well. So join in on the conversation we're having, give feedback. You can ask our panelists something, David, myself, or sometimes you guys share us the news as it unfolds. And you can do that on two different sites that we are, of course, streaming on. YouTube has super chats. And if you're watching after the live stream, it's called Super Thanks. And when you donate $5 or more, or whatever you feel led to donate to help keep our journalism going strong, we make sure to read that and make it a part of the show. And we so appreciate that. And if you are on our Free Speech Friends platform on Rumble, then it's called Rumble Rants, and you do the same thing. And yeah, that's very fun.
Thank you so much, Drea. And speaking of news, something that continues to be white hot on the front burner, well, it's castle laws and what is the definition of excessive force or unreasonable force. And we have a presser that just happened a few hours ago in Brampton, Ontario. We have a couple of clips. One is Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, addressing this and advocating for a major change to the criminal code that would, favor the homeowner at 3:20 in the morning and not the guy with a lethal force weapon breaking into the home. And better yet, folks, we had our very own big boss man, Ezra Levant. He attended the presser and got a question in. So why don't we watch those clips and then we'll discuss the aftermath. Check it out.
Based on the principle that your home is your castle, we're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law, failing which one of our party's MPs will put forward such a bill. It will amend Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code, which right now says that you can defend yourself based on 9 very complicated and vague conditions. Now look, if you're defending your house, you don't have time to think through 9 different conditions. You have one condition: to protect yourself and your kids. And it is wrong for the law, for the police, and for judges to apply a complicated, indecipherable legal doctrine against you when you were only doing what is right. Our amendment instead will change Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code to say that the use of force, including lethal force, is presumed reasonable against an individual who unlawfully enters a house and poses a threat to the safety of anyone inside. The proposed amendment is reasonable and prudent. It applies only to the unlawful entry of a home and preserves proportionality. Simply put, it means you have the right to use force to defend your home and your family against someone who threatens you and who has entered illegally. This bill will also put Canada in line with other developed civilized countries. Ireland, several Australian states, Spain, the United Kingdom, and some American states already have this principle embedded. And it will make sure that Canadians are treated right for a change. We think that our role in this parliament is to put forward good ideas. And so my message to Mr. Carney is steal our best ideas. Work with us. Let's get it done. Let's put our country first. Who cares who gets the credit? Take our ideas so that we can reverse not only the crime and chaos liberals have caused, but let's also take these ideas to bring the cost of living, immigration, and unemployment down. Keep our people safe. Let's put our country first. Let's once again work together, all of us from all parties, to make this a country where everyone who works hard gets a beautiful house in a safe street with good food on the table, united under our proud Canadian flag. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's go around the horn. Daniel, let's begin with you. I think this is right in your wheelhouse, being the publisher of Calibre magazine. I think Pierre Poilievre nailed it. The fact that there are 9 vague and complicated conditions when it comes to a homeowner fighting back with force or lethal force. And I have to tell you, if someone's breaking into my home at 3:20 in the morning and they have lethal force, the very last thing I'm thinking about is, gee, I don't want to overdo it. You know, I might get charged by the cops later tonight or tomorrow. So I'm going to respond in kind. No, I have adrenaline coursing through my blood. I am in Papa Bear mode. I'm sure Drea would resort to Mama Bear mode, and you will do whatever you can. So I think the idea of putting a definition in which you can use force, including lethal force, into the criminal code, much like it exists in so many other countries and so many American states, I think that's a winner. I think that has great popular support here in Canada. Daniel, what say you?
It's hard to argue with anything you said. I mean, obviously the whole statement's pretty clear cut and it's pretty unassailable. My only concern is that the currently and in the past process has been the punishment. There'd have to be some additional shifts towards the law can say one thing, but right now you can technically still use illegal force to defend yourself in your home, given the 9 circumstances. But what happens is the legal system simply goes through, instead of assuming that you're innocent of this, they simply charge you, and then they work through those 9 criteria in the court, and you end up paying a ton. And that relates to why I think the statement's quite interesting from the gun perspective, is that back in 2013, we saw a case with Ian Thompson. People were firebombing his house and his dogs and whatnot. He was a firearms instructor. He went into his gun safe. He pulled out a handgun and fired it in the air to scare them off, and then was summarily charged with a bunch of offenses. That case took over a year, I believe, to be resolved, and almost 6 figures of his own money. And he was eventually acquitted. But by the time you're acquitted, you've paid more than your life savings. You probably remortgaged your house. It ends up being such a thing where it can be legal, but it can still be such a painful process to go through that it will ruin your life to engage in that. And I think that's the thing that's problematic. But what I think is interesting is that in the Ian Thompson case, when that was going on in 2013, even amongst gun owners, it was controversial. There was a lot of gun owners that were saying, well, we don't own guns to defend ourselves. That's not what we do in Canada. We don't have concealed carry. They were distancing themselves from that US rhetoric. And it was actually probably the majority, I would say, were kind of doing that. Now to see this rhetoric amongst the general population, to say nothing of how the gun community responds to it, to see it in the general population is, I think, indicating a tectonic shift in the attitudes around these sorts of issues, be it guns, self-defense, how those things intertwine, that it kind of looks like we're on a trajectory where things like this are going to become inevitable. If it doesn't happen with Pierre Poilievre forming the next government, it will be a future government that does, because we are reaching a point where Canada is becoming more violent. It is suffering more crime, and we are not recruiting more police officers. We are not putting criminals in jail for long enough. We are not essentially dealing with the problem. So we're going to reach an impasse where we kind of reach a spot where we go, well, there's a lot of crime and we don't have enough cops. So what's the solution going to be? Just let people be victims? Probably not. So I think it's an interesting step towards that conclusion, I think.
No, great points, Daniel. But I got to tell you, I find that somewhat surprising. There was gun owners that weren't all in. I would argue they would surely have their come to Jesus moment with U.S. rhetoric at 3:20 in the morning. If there's a guy holding a crossbow that can take down a moose, all that would be out the window. But Daniel, tell me, Kirk, tell me, I think to Kirk's point, or Daniel's point, I'm sorry, I'm getting the names mixed up. The process is indeed the penalty, but I think what Pierre Poilievre is suggesting is to remove the penalization part, i.e., if you actually killed a home intruder under his amendments, you wouldn't be charged. You wouldn't be going to court. You wouldn't be facing high five-figure, even six-figure legal bills. So doesn't this, in a very big way, take away the process as the penalty factor?
Well, that's the hope. We got to step back a little and remember Canada society has been a high-trust society for a long time, and the Liberals have decided to mass immigrate our essentially crime stats. We've reached record high levels, and the solution to it has become slapping criminals on the wrist and releasing them back into the streets. Mm-hmm. So the evolution of our legal system must adjust to what's happening day to day in our society. When someone breaks into your house at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., you don't have the time to adjust to see, do they have a weapon, do they not? A weapon in any case is essentially an equalizer, right? What is a lethal weapon? Someone can punch someone on the side of the head and they'll be dead, yeah. Right? But someone needs to be able to protect themselves. For me, to defend myself against someone that's breaking in is a lot different than a 60-year-old or a 60-year-old woman or a 20-year-old woman that's home alone. So we need to be able to not question the homeowners' decisions when they're fighting for their life. When someone broke into your house, they essentially decided that your life is worth less than the amount of goods they can steal and sell for. So they made the cognitive decision, and the onus isn't upon the homeowner to do due diligence on how to defend themselves. They have to defend themselves for their life. So it's up to the courts to take it and make sure that those criminals are locked up and locked away for good. We're seeing them released over and over again. So I'm hoping that the new changes, if they even get passed and have support, will discourage the cops from wasting time and resources on homeowners who are just trying to survive the crime epidemic that we have going on in Canada.
No, 100%. And of course, Poilievre has hammered home tightening up, bail conditions, parole, etc., catch and release. And lo and behold, the alleged crossbow in home intruder in Lindsay, Mike Breen, guess what? He was already wanted by police for probation violation. Unbelievable. But you know what? It's all those, duck hunters in Saskatchewan. They're the problem. We have to take their guns away. That's going to solve this. Drea, let me ask you this. At the end of the day, Pierre Poilievre's job is to get reelected. I want to get your thoughts. Is this a winner in Canada? And coast to coast in Canada? Personally, I would think it is, because our stories on the Jeremy McDonald home invasion in Lindsay, there has been thousands and thousands of comments, and I haven't had time to read them all, but I've read most. And I'm telling you, it is 99.99% in support of Jeremy McDonald fighting back, criticizing the police and the prosecutors for going after him for defending his life. I would argue, without knowing, I bet you that 0.01% saying, no, he went too far. Those are liberals living in gated communities with security guards. So what say you? Does this policy change resonate with Canadians?
I assume you're talking to me. It froze a bit. So sorry. But yes, absolutely. This is a no-brainer. And it's a no-brainer because anybody in this situation most, like you said before, are going to want to defend themselves. The James Brown verse that I love when he says, I don't know karate, but I know crazy. That's exactly what would happen to me if someone's in my house. I don't have time to consider these 9 rules, or to be honest, I don't know how much I care that there are rules at that point. I'm going to do everything I can. I know my husband would do the same. If he wouldn't, I wouldn't be married to him. That's just the way it is. I did notice one thing. It's very slight, but I thought it was interesting. Dan mentioned that in the other case with the dogs before, there was that rhetoric and wanting to separate yourself from the United States. I thought it was interesting the order of which Poilievre listed the other places that basically have the castle law. Did you notice that he said the United States last? I think that that was on purpose to try to not make this look like this is coming from the United States and that he is behaving like Trump when he's going ahead and delivering this really common sense approach. And of course, rock star Premier Smith was so great in the way that she handled this question, which is saying, if you don't want to get shot or beat up, don't break into somebody's home. It's really that simple.
You know, you're reading my mind, Drea. I mean, I can hear the liberal left screaming, oh my God, he's advocating homeowners use lethal force. But you nailed it. Daniel Smith said, hey, you don't want to get hurt or killed? Simple. Don't break into somebody's house at 3 a.m. Case closed. Why don't we, everyone, throw to our big boss man, Ezra Levant, asking a question, and we'll check out what Mr. Poilievre had to say.
Yes, Ezra.
Thanks for having me here, Ezra Levant from Rebel News. For years before marijuana was decriminalized, it was the position of police and prosecution not to charge anyone with small amounts in possession. So they didn't wait for the Parliament. I see that Mark Carney's favorite premier, Doug Ford, has said he's for the castle law, and other provinces like Alberta have said that too. Will you call on Doug Ford not to wait for Carney to reconvene Parliament, but rather to issue a statement that there will be no more prosecutions of homeowners who defend their homes, just as a matter of policy, because right now his prosecutors are going after Jeremy McDonald, whose home was invaded in Lindsay, Ontario.
And those are provincial prosecutors who are doing that? Well, I think that's a great idea. I don't know the legal powers that a premier has to direct the prosecution service, so I would not comment on it. But I would hope prosecutors would stop going after law-abiding people who are defending their property. We need prosecutors to go after criminals. Now, as for their ability to do that, I've never been a Crown prosecutor, so I don't know. We have a Crown prosecutor here, in Larry Brock, so maybe he can jump in on this. But I will say this: we need to change the law. Let's make the law clear. Let's bring into place the idea that your home is your castle, so that no prosecutor, judge, or police officer can ever go after someone who is defending their home against an invader who presents a threat. Do you have anything to add, Larry? Prosecutor. This is the prosecutor.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Although Crown prosecutors in every province, particularly in Ontario, maintain independence, as long as they can justify that independence, they are still directed policy-wise by the Attorney General. In this case, the Attorney General of Ontario being Doug Downey. To answer your question, Mr. Levant, Mr. Downey has that ability to perhaps direct Crowns in light of what we are doing at a federal level to reflect upon the change in legislation we hope is about to come.
Great question. Very interesting answer. Kirk, let's start with you. You know, I found it somewhat disingenuous last week when Premier Ford weighed in on this. First of all, he called the system broken. That was his quote. I presume he means the justice system. Well, fix it. You're the premier. Secondly, and I'm paraphrasing now, but he said, whoa, if someone broke into my house, I'm going to use whatever force necessary to protect my family. Well, the other day, I paid a visit to Doug Ford's house. Do you know what? He has 2 Toronto Police Service cruisers in his driveway, 20 24/7. Doug will never get his hands dirty. He's got lethal force by police officers in his driveway around the clock. So, I mean, the tears he was shedding, I'm sorry, to me, they were of the crocodilian variety.
Yeah, it's you know, we need to stop with the empty words, and we need to actually see some leadership at the provincial level, at the federal level. You know, the crime wave in Ontario hasn't started in a week. It's been going on for, you know, at least 5 years now, with a year-over-year increase in stats. And Doug Ford hasn't really said anything about it. So it's his job, and it's the job of Ontarians as well, is to start raising the alarm and actually do something about it. And he didn't even really say much about the car theft or break-ins or anything until something affected him, and then all of a sudden he was up in arms about it. But well, it's been happening. There's maps, crime maps in Ontario, and there's streets where there is like every other house has a break-in or car theft in it. So imagine living in those streets in Ontario, where you essentially, as a statistic, you're expected your car to be stolen. And people are installing metal doors now. They're trying to put barricades so you can't reverse or steal the car out. It's absolutely insane what is happening. And he didn't say a word until it's impacted him. So we actually need to see some leadership and not just word salads in a presser and then moving on 2 minutes later.
Wow, Kirk, you mean people are turning their homes into fortresses, putting in steel doors? The Toronto Police Service says leave your key fob at an easily accessible point, so, you know, we don't have to deal with the crime scene cleanup later. But, you know, Daniel, I want to address something with you, and it is the inconsistency regarding force and lethal force across Canada. I'm sure you're familiar with this story. 4 years ago in Red Deer, Alberta, a homeowner returned to his home, and it was very much quite different than the Lindsay case involving Jeremy McDonald, because when the Red Deer resident returned to his house, he saw his home was broken into. He found the intruder asleep, if you can imagine, in his room. So what he did is he picked up the phone, called police. He picked up his shotgun, which had a shell in it, woke up the intruder and said, "You stay right there." And originally the intruder agreed, and then he decided to disagree. A scuffle. He was shot dead. Do you know, gentlemen, that the RCMP of Red Deer did not even press charges, which the prosecutor agreed with? And yet here we have in Lindsay a home invasion 320. The assailant is armed with the lethal weapon, and Jeremy McDonald gets charged with aggravated assault and assault with a weapon. Daniel, can you make sense of this for me?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that at a political level, people are acting because these leaders are much like Doug Ford. They have police officers around them. You know, Mark Carney lives in a very Tony neighborhood. They don't have to confront how Canada actually is, because a lot of us live in different areas, rural areas, Red Deer. So you get these massive cultural divides where in Alberta, obviously because of some of the things that even premiers have said, even before Danielle Smith, like they have a very strong culture of self-defense, independence, self-responsibility on both ends, where they, you know, that responsibility cuts both ways. If someone breaks into your house, they have to take responsibility for that action. As the homeowner, you are responsible for protecting your house. Whereas in Ottawa and Ontario, that's a very different culture. Like I've traveled around the country doing various gun things, and I can tell you as someone who's been born and raised in the West, every time I go to Ontario, it's always struck me how it's very difficult to put into words, but it is a very different culture. It's almost a culture of permissiveness, where in BC and Alberta, it's if the law says I can't do it, then everything else is on the table. Whereas in Ontario, it feels much more the law needs to tell me I can, and then I can do it. And that's sort of the East-West divide. And I think that explains why in Alberta, you're going to see people not charged. It's led to, you know, provinces or provincial governments in Alberta, especially, that have imbued their provincial prosecution service with cultures of independence, respecting people's independence and freedom, their ability to defend themselves. And that's been going on for decades. So we see the result in cases like that. And in Ontario, on the other hand, it's that much more, we'll tell you what you can do. So when someone does something, they're going to say, well, we're just going to run you through the system, and we'll see how it shakes out after we've charged you and what the courts say. And I think that's how that is sort of explained. I think it's also evidence that we need to address this probably in a more significant way than what Pierre Poilievre is proposing with an amendment to the criminal code. I think that having gone through a lot of these laws for years now, the Firearms Act is especially bad for this. Our laws are simply too complicated at this point. They've been put through so many governments that prefer incrementalism over actual reform. So they just keep making small amendments to laws to try and wiggle things out. So in this case, they say, okay, well, we'll make it so that if someone breaks into your house, you can use force if necessary, but we're going to preserve proportionality. So how's that going to work, really? It needs to be a bit more of a significant revision so that police, homeowners, and the Crowns all have a lot more black and white scenarios in front of where they go, yeah, this just isn't illegal, and this is. I think that would probably do a lot to restore faith in the justice system. It would also unburden our police officers with looking at stuff and going, that's not a crime, this is. We're going to reallocate resources where they're needed. I mean, obviously, like I said, the Firearms Act is the best example of this because it is so convoluted that we need special lawyers to help us decipher it at this point. It shouldn't be that complicated. So I would like to see a bit more of a strong stance, and I think that it's the right step. But to refer to your earlier question, if this is, a winner, as you asked, Drea, like this is a step towards a winner, but I think there's actually room to run on this and take a more significant leadership position, saying, yeah, we're going to reform the criminal code completely. We're going to address the crime problem we have at the root source of the tools we've got, the law. We're not just going to amend it in small ways. We're going to take a fresh, clean sheet look, and we're going to make it work for the modern era, because this isn't a very old document that has been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten to such a degree it's kind of lost the plot.
Great points, Daniel. And to me, it sounds like you're arguing for a Canadianized version of the Second Amendment, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. But Drea, let's go to you. What about Daniel's original point that maybe this is a regional issue? I lived in Alberta for 2 years in the 80s. I can tell you by far, Alberta is the most American-like province in our Dominion. And maybe there is more respect and appreciation for the rights of firearms owners there than in liberal Ontario. Is that what it comes down to? Is that the reason why the Red Deer man doesn't even get charged and Jeremy McDonald gets 2 very serious criminal charges laid against him?
I'd have to agree. I think that's what it is. And I think that's kind of what Poilievre was getting at. Like, we're supposed to bring forth good ideas. It should be, when it comes to keeping citizens safe, that's nonpartisan, that everybody's on the same page and trying to put their heads together. But we don't see that in between provinces. Provinces and their provincial prosecution do behave differently. And that includes in British Columbia. For example, you have journalists doing whole seminars about the attacks on journalists. They're never talking about Rebel News journalists, of course, but you have a crazed trans individual threatening my children and using real hate language against me, and the BC Prosecution Service will do nothing, even though this person is a convicted criminal. This person has a very violent past, and this person has already assaulted one of our journalists. Our province here does not take that seriously when it doesn't align with their own political ideology. Another more recent example is Samadoun. We had it's now, I would say Canada almost reluctantly deemed it a terrorist entity. But before that, praising the Hamas 7 terrorist attack, calling it heroic and brave, death to Canada, death to Israel, death to United States being chanted in their protests. I didn't see it personally. Many have said that they received pamphlets that were describing how to do a terrorist attack in buildings. Those types of things are happening, and yet our Attorney General, it's been well over a year since the leader of Samadoun, Charlotte Cates, was in fact charged with hate crimes, and our BC Prosecution Service hasn't done anything. They haven't done any charges, which is why MLA Dallas Brody, the leader of 1BC, recently did her own private prosecution. So I think that whole situation where there's a terrorist entity and a leader, and their movement is getting Canadian citizens to call for the death of Canada, I think that would have been taken seriously in a province like Alberta.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's beyond two-tier policing and politicking. It's probably into 3 or 4 tiers. And I think of the iconic image of Lady Justice, you know, holding the sword in one hand, the scales in the other, and she has a blindfold on. Well, that blindfold has been replaced with X-ray glasses these days, and it really does in many cases come down to identity politics. Hey guys, we have to take a quick ad break because we're at the halfway mark of the show. So why don't we do that? And on the other half, Kirk, you've weighed in on what you call the new Canada. And well, New Canada is kind of like New Coke, isn't it? It's not that good. We'll pick up that story on the other side.
Gun bans make great distractions.
Trudeau may be gone, but Carney has picked up his same rhetoric.
We will quickly, and I mean quickly, reinvigorate the buyback of
Hunters, collectors, competitors, and defenders of tradition are still being targeted, while criminals run wild under Liberal policy. But we are fighting back. Join us, Canada's National Firearms Association, in defense of freedom.
Do you agree with me? It is time to make Canada great again. And that is why we at Rebel News have teamed up with MCGA hats to introduce, well, the fashion sensation of 2025. Oh, and by the way, these beautiful hats, they are made in Canada. We don't rely on cheap imports coming over from China. So what are you waiting for, folks? Show your pride. This is the perfect thing for a patriot to wear, or maybe there's a patriot in your life that you would like to gift such a hat. Please go to mcgahats.ca. That's mcgahats.ca. Don't be shy about it. Wear this cap. Let everybody know you want to make Canada great again.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
And we've got one more ad because it's your last chance to get tickets to a really good event. It's and your last chance to save, I should say. It's one of the most important conservative events of the year. The Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference is coming to Calgary September 5th and 6th. This year's theme is the West Place in Canada. How cute. And you'll hear from some of the biggest voices in Canadian politics and media, including Premier Daniel Smith, Preston Manning, Conrad Black, and Tristan Hopper. So reserve your tickets today at canadastrongandfree.network. canadastrongandfree.network. So you can save right now if you jump on that.
As Billy Redlines used to say, don't you dare miss it. Now, Kirk, let's go to you for this story. This is incredibly disturbing. You had a commentary about it. This is the new Canada. Muslim jihadist Abdul Aziz Kawam asked a person sitting at a bus stop if he was Muslim. And when he said no, Abdul did a prayer and attacked him with a knife. Then he boarded a bus, and that's the footage there, folks, and tried to slash the victim's throat. You know, I don't even recognize my beloved Dominion anymore. And my take on this, I think, Kirk, it goes back almost 2 years ago to the massacre in Israel when we had what I call the Hamasholes coming out on the streets every weekend, chanting genocide, which is against the criminal code, displaying swastikas, cosplaying as Sinwar, if you can believe it. And what do the cops do? Well, they don't do anything. Well, that's not true. They'll arrest peaceful counter demonstrators. They'll arrest members of the independent press. And on very cold days, they'll bring the Hamasholes coffee and Timbits. What I think is happening is that when the mob sees that no one's in charge, they are emboldened and they push the envelope further. I'm making a lot of assumptions. I don't know. Maybe this guy is completely off his rocker. He's mentally ill. But because he's bringing up the religious element, that's where I'm going with it. What's your analysis on in terms of what the unspoken story might be here?
Well, I think what's happening in Canada is absolutely insane, and this is a new reality that we have to face. And it's and this is not the only incident. So this guy, just a quick background on this guy. He's pled allegiance to ISIS. He's made videos of him supporting ISIS. His computer was full of different radicalization videos and everything that comes with the territory. He's been wandering around the streets in Syria specifically to kill non-Muslims for ISIS. And he found one at the shelter. That's why he asked him if he's a Muslim or not. The person said no. He did a 2-minute prayer next to him and then went to try to attack him. And then afterwards, he still had all the time in the world to board a bus and slash that guy's throat that was in the video, which is luckily he cut his vocal cords, but nothing more serious than that. And this is something that it's not the first case, it's not the last case. So we have a lot of radicalization happening in Canada. The IRGC that's been designated as a terrorist group, the Canadian government hasn't gone against anyone at all trying to remove them out of Canada. We haven't stopped any radicalization in any mosques. We have videos of imams preaching hate and terrorism nonstop. We have tons of famous videos from the imam in Victoria, who is glorifying child sacrifice essentially for the cause of jihad. We have immigrated and gave citizenship to a father who was on video for ISIS beheading a person with a sword, and he was still able to get Canadian citizenship. And they planned an attack in New York to kill as many people, as many Jews as possible. Thankfully, the FBI was able to put a stop to it because our authorities are so incompetent in handling the situation. And I think this is one of the biggest issues we have in Canada. We're facing now with things that we haven't had to face before on a large scale. And now this occurrence is almost every other month in Canada, including a lot of youth involved in it now. So we have a lot of radicalization happening at a young age, which is probably the most dangerous thing happening, because as they grow up, it just gives you the idea of scale that's happening at certain communities.
Oh, 100%. I mean, whether you're a marketer on Madison Avenue or a Marxist, as the saying goes, get them young, get them forever. But I'm going to give you some friendly advice, Kirk. Be very careful when you criticize the IRGC. I found out the hard way a year ago, January, when I asked Fraulein Freeland about this terror group. Well, I got falsely arrested and assaulted by her personal protection. So there were some sacred cows in this country. But Daniel, I want to get your take on this angle. I find that this story is getting nowhere near the amount of attention that it should be getting in the mainstream media. And I ponder if Abdul looked like, well, me, and he was wearing a Make America Great Again cap, and he was citing biblical verses, and then went on his jihad. I'm thinking front page across the country, toxic Christianity, white supremacy, you name it. The left would lose their mind. But once again, it's like, somebody kind of got angry, and let's not dwell on it. I think the hypocrisy is outrageous. What say you?
I think it is. I think that if it had been the scenario you outlined, it also would have probably gained headlines more for being an outlier than anything else, because I think that violence like this, be it religiously motivated from a terrorist kind of perspective, Canadians have somewhat become inured to these headlines. We've seen these protests from people supporting Hamas. We've seen Samadoun. We've seen these people for years now, taking up the streets, occupying spaces, getting increasingly violent. We've seen NDP MPs give speeches wearing the garb of a terrorist entity. And I think at this point, Canadians are almost just, we're overburdened with, and this is just speaking about that sort of thing. Never mind the dad who got killed outside a Starbucks in Vancouver for asking someone not to vape near his kid.
Yes.
The 8-year-old boy who got shot accidentally in Toronto like 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
The violence is growing, and we see these headlines. I mean, the one that kind of gets me is the 8-year-old boy one, because 10, 15 years ago, that would have been frontline news for a week plus. There was an innocent person killed in Vancouver, and it created a week's worth of headlines, a police crackdown, innocent people are being killed by gangbangers in the street. We need to stop this. An 8-year-old gets shot in his house, and it's just, Mark Carney tweets about something that happened in Minneapolis instead. And it's this, and this is what I think is driving why I say when Poilievre makes these statements, he's got room to run, because in this video, I think, what Kirk speaks about with regards to the changing face of violence in Canada and how we're opening ourselves up to a threat that we haven't seen before. A lot of Canadians probably just see a TransLink bus and go, I've ridden that. That could have been me. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of these violent headlines are having an impact that I don't think the politicians recognize, because they prefer the stats. They look at the raw numbers. Mark Carney goes to StatsCan and goes, well, if crime ticked down 0.4%, we're winning. But they're ignoring the fact that it is now at such a rate that crimes are occurring in places that people can see themselves. Everyone has stood outside a Starbucks, and everyone watched the video of that guy getting killed outside a Starbucks. Everyone's ridden a bus. Everyone watches this video of a guy getting stabbed on a bus. And they just go, that could be me. And then that drives this ethos of, we need to prioritize self-defense. We need to be able to look after ourselves in a way that we've not seen before. And I think it's actually healthy, because the leaning on police to do our work for us and to protect us, the police can't really protect you. They come after the fact, and you hope it's still going on long enough that they can do something about it. I think it's a good move, but I think it's very scary at the same time, because I wonder where this will go. I mean, we do seem to be targeted by extremist groups. We have been since 9/11, when those guys trained how to fly up here. Are we the soft target for North American Western culture? Probably. Do we want to keep being that? Probably not.
Well said, Daniel. And, Drea, Surrey is in your neck of the woods. And to Daniel's point about the timeline, 10 to 15 years, I think that's a good timeline. I have seen, I guess coincidentally in the last decade, Canada under Liberal rule. But in 10 years, I have seen wicked declines by every metric in this country. And I want to ask you, I'm not familiar with Surrey, but do you say, 10, 15 years ago, if you lived in Surrey, would anyone dream this could be a danger, that you're sitting at a bus stop, minding your own business, and some random stranger comes out of the blue, and he's, as the Bruce Springsteen line goes, he's wearing trouble on his shirt. He's looking for somebody to murder. I mean, was this ever a thing in Surrey 15 years ago?
Well, Surrey has always been sort of a crime hotspot when you look at the rest of the landscape here, and it's only gotten worse and worse and worse. But no, I don't think, 10, maybe 15 years ago, people would expect something like this happening. But like was said just before, there's a pattern out here in British Columbia. Yusuf Qathadra, the imam that was mentioned as well, is very extreme in what he says and glorifies martyrs as if it's, the most noble thing that you can become. And that's not just in front of his, congregation, that imam. He has a YouTube channel. He is in charge of a whole youth sort of community center. And this is who these people are when they're going and listening to him, getting their advice and direction from. We also had the plane that was recently hijacked in British Columbia. And that person also, made pledges to Allah on Facebook before going there, and Islam. So this is a pattern that we're seeing. And a lot of it is centered in BC. So I think if anybody's paying attention now, it is less surprising. I remember when I first heard about this horrific incident on the bus, I was like, I've heard this before. And sure enough, it was years ago, I think it was 2015, the same thing happened in LA, I believe it was. I put the link there. But somebody went and said, "Are you Muslims?" And when they said no, he stabbed them as well. So it's a very frightening thing, and we need to pay attention to this radicalization. And meanwhile, we have the RCMP telling the public that traditional views are what's the new extremism.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister saying Muslim values are Canadian values. I wonder if that dovetails into jihadi values, Sharia values. I'm a little unclear, but I think the takeaway, not trying to make light of the situation, if any dude looks like he's packing a knife or worse, asks you if you're a Muslim, the answer is yes. I'm on my way to the mosque right now because I don't like this disturbing trend emerging. And speaking of religion, why don't we shift gears to a very interesting story. The Quebec government is tabling a bill to ban prayer in public places. Now, I'll give you my take on this. I think this is about what we've seen, as I said, for almost 2 years ago in the streets of our cities and towns. The Hamasos blocking intersections, saying that they need to pray. And you have a constitutional right in Canada to pray. You do not have a constitutional right to block an intersection. Instead of the government going after the lawbreakers and looking like bigots or Islamophobes or what have you, I think they're saying, oh, it's a blanket ban for everyone. So if there was, say, a Christian person or a Buddhist in a park by themselves praying, that's going to be against the law? Kirk, what say you?
Well, this is the problem with it. It's instead of addressing the actual problem, it's a blanket law to go after everyone involved. So the question is, why should all Canadians' lives be hindered because of this extremist part of our society? So rather than handling them and dealing with them, that's the big issue, is why should it affect everyone else, right? We've seen those Hamas supporters essentially. This is nothing more than a dominance move.
Yep.
When they take over streets, praying, do whatever they want in any street, any part of Canada, the police just sits and watches and protects them. And in Quebec, and specifically, they're praying right in front of Catholic churches. This is a very deliberate thing. What most people need to understand is, in Islam, symbolism is very important. And people in the Middle East, symbolism is extremely important. We don't take it to the same, we don't have the same association with it in the Western world, but when they pray in front of a church, that is huge symbolism into their community, into the world. So this is nothing more than them taking a piss on the wall there, saying this will be ours one day. And we've had, I believe you actually interviewed this gentleman, and I've posted it before, of Muslim who said, listen, the future in Canada is ours. You will have no chance because we have more kids than you. And then what are you going to do? You'll have no choice but to follow Sharia law. Mm-hmm. So we have a situation if you're short-term versus long-term thinking. And this bill is nothing but a short-term bandage of what the problem is, which is a long-term growth of this extremism in Canada.
Yeah, great points, Kirk. But, you know, Daniel, and I agree with you, this is all about, I guess, Islamic exceptionalism. The idea that we're going to take over your roads, we're going to go into the Eaton Center, we're not going to go away, you know, so violating private property rights. And the authorities do nothing. And again, they are the enablers of this behavior. But switching gears on this topic, Daniel, I think this law is doomed to go down in flames. And I base this on, it's a fascinating case, and I urge our viewers to Google it. It was a 1953 Supreme Court of Canada ruling, and it was against the government of Quebec because the Quebec government had banned the Jehovah's Witnesses in the province. And the ostensible reason why they were banned is they did not seek a permit to distribute their literature on the streets. I mean, it was bogus. It was really a vendetta against them by the then premier of Quebec. But the Supreme said, no. You can't ban a faith. So I see this facing the same scrutiny in the court, maybe even not as far as the Supreme Court of Canada. Maybe it's the Quebec Supreme Court. What say you?
I can't see it. I can't see it going. I mean, from a basic constitutional perspective, it doesn't seem like, as a non-lawyer, it doesn't seem like you can tell Canadians who have the right to practice a religion they can't practice it in public spaces. So I also politically, it seems like something that you kind of put out there and see how it goes, which is sort of how it feels like. And I think that's probably for the best because, I mean, this just doesn't seem like the right answer. I have a huge issue with it from the perspective of, you know, tarring everyone with the same brush. There are people who are obviously using prayer as sort of a tool to their organizational ends. Just trespass them. When they go into the Eden Center, trespass them.
What
Take
a concept.
Your cops, go, we want to trespass them, get them out of here. Deal with it, you know, address the actual issue. Don't try and make some, because even if they were to pass this law in that hypothetical scenario, what are they going to do? Arrest them all? No, they won't. Like, are they going to stop praying? No, they won't. We will be in the exact same situation, but they go, well, we did something. We have the appearance of doing something, but it's not actually going to change anything. And I think that they need to take a different stance towards this, more of a law and order type stance on the existing stuff that could deal with this. Because like you said, you don't have the right to lay down in the middle of the road. There are laws against that in every province. Use them. Stop. It's such a thing with modern politicians. And I see it in the gun thing for sure, obviously, to address a problem that has already got existing laws to prevent it by adding more laws, because that's what politicians do. That's their toolbox. That's what makes them get behind the pulpit and they can go, we've done so, we banned the guns, we fixed the problem, instead of going, well, what we did is actually we have increased the police budget. It's super not sexy. No one cares. Crime rate goes down. No one notices, and they don't get the credit. And I think this is what Lego is really going for in here, is some sort of credit for stopping this instead of simply going, this is BS. It has to stop. We have the laws already on the books. We're going to deploy those. It would also be way faster. So I think it's a bit silly. I'm curious how this will go down amongst the Catholics and whatnot in Quebec, because I think everyone can kind of read this, and obviously a lot of other religions don't pray in public per se with the frequency, but everyone kind of see themselves, well, what if I want to? So I don't know. It's an interesting issue, though.
But Daniel, I can tell you that in Toronto, the woke city of Toronto and the woke police brass have issued statements about Muslims blocking intersections and stating that it is their constitutional right to pray. And when I reached out to the city, because the police won't respond to us anymore, when I reached out to the city and I said, you're right, they have a constitutional right to pray. There is no constitutional right to block an intersection. Their response was simply this: we stand by our statement. So as they say in Alabama, this dog don't hunt. But, Drea, over to you. You're too young to remember, I'm assuming, but, back in the early 70s, presumably before you were born, there was this fascinating CBC game show called This Is the Law. And basically they had a panel, and they would have to, they had an actor, Paul Soules, and he would be doing something very innocuous, and then you'd see a guy dressed as a policeman putting his hand on the shoulder and taking him away, and you had to guess what law he was broken. Like, for example, in Saskatchewan, evidently, it's against the law to paint your ladder. So if we revise that, could you imagine there's you in a Quebec park, and you're deciding to pause and to pray, and suddenly somebody with the Montreal Police Service comes over, puts his hand on your shoulder, takes you away because, well, you're breaking this new you can't pray in public law. Dre, I guess what I'm getting at, this is absurd.
It is absurd. And I agree. I don't think it is going to go through. But if it did, it would be a tragedy for Canada. We are supposed to respect freedom of religion. I believe if Muslims, you know, a lot of them have to pray a handful a day, they should be able to do so peacefully. Again, it comes down to the obstruction. They should not be obstructing or intimidating, you know, churchgoers when they're doing. And the fact that Quebec isn't using the law in place to go ahead and target that, to me, as you know, as a Christian or just a Canadian who has seen how the laws have been used against Christians over a pattern in many ways, especially over the last 5 years, I see that a law like that would end up, oh, we're too scared to use it on the Muslims, but, you know, let's go ahead and arrest this street preacher, which, by the way, we're already doing. We're already arresting street preachers. I've counted over 20 of them in the last, you know, 5 years for the same things that a lot of protesters are doing, having amplification. Not to mention, Christians are supposed to be like Jesus. What did Jesus do? How did he pray? A lot of times he would go out into the wilderness, which in our case, if you live in an apartment, would be, you know, public crown land. And that's something that I do. I do go into the nature and pray. For that to be illegal seems outrageous. We also have the Falun Gong. They're persecuted for praying in public in China. Now we're going to start doing that out here when they do their beautiful dance prayer or whatever it is. I mean, there's just so many examples of how this is wrong. And I do believe that it would be used in a two-tiered way.
Oh, 100%. And with the Christian street preachers, we just had that story go up about Pastor Jeffrey in Toronto. He doesn't block streets. He doesn't block sidewalks. He doesn't, when the police say don't use your amplifier, he turns it off. He doesn't preach hatred or anything like that. And yet every Sunday in a Jewish neighborhood in Toronto from 11 a.m. Till 1 p.m., the Hamassos gather. They preach genocide. They display swastikas. They dress as Sinwar, and they use amplification. Nothing to see here. How do you take your coffee? Double? Unbelievable, the two-tier policing going on right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he take off the amplification and still get arrested?
Yes. And then the police said, you are banned from downtown Toronto. There he is right there, folks, Jeffrey Saposanic. And the police definition of downtown Toronto, I can tell you, it was approximately 90% of the city. So if he's north of the 401, it's okay. Absolutely outrageous. And they don't even have that power. They're just making stuff up. But, you know, we're running out of racetrack, and we flagged one topic on our email that went out promoting the panel discussion. And, of course, it's very important to every single one of us. It's the Canadian economy. I'm looking at the headlines right now. Canada's economy shrinks in second quarter as exports crushed. And here's something, it's kind of in a way close to home for me. Crown Royal Bottler shutting down Ontario plant, shifting some operations to US. This Crown Royal Bottler, it's been around for a long time. It's in the Windsor area. My sons a few years ago moved to Windsor because there's no hope of getting into the housing market in the Greater Toronto area. And I can tell you right now, Windsor has 11.2% unemployment. That is the highest rate it has been since they started collecting these stats. This is going to add fuel to the fire. Kirk, I thought we voted in Captain Canuck on April 28th. I thought elbows up. He was going to sort this mess out with the big bad orange man to the south. What happened?
Well, this is the problem when you essentially glorify your resume, then say it's a crisis, and then shut the government and go on vacation. It's absolutely insane what's been happening. If you see a crisis, you don't stop working. You actually go get things built. You know, Ontario as a whole has had a growth in unemployment every single year. This year, they've barely created 60,000 new jobs. New full-time jobs. That's our largest province of 10 million plus people. So there's essentially no jobs being created in Canada. The payroll employment for last reading was that Canada's actually lost 32,000 jobs, almost 33. So, and we're still issuing crap load of foreign worker visas. It's absolutely insanity.
Yeah.
We have the worst youth unemployment essentially ever in Canada's history. And our kids can't get a job. They can't put work experience on their resume. They can't build up skills to advance themselves into the economy. So, and we're still issuing visas for foreigners to come here. It's absolutely madness. So the two of them, essentially the Canadian economy will collapse in itself because it's just not sustainable. And this is part of the reason why we're seeing increasing crime rates. People just have to do something. Yeah. And when people are bored, they can't work, they either do drugs or crime. And right now, Canada has 3.2 people unemployed for every job vacancy there is. So, which is absolutely insane stats. And this is probably one of the worst stats, one of the most important stats to look for, because as that number grows, we essentially have less jobs and more people looking for jobs. And those are the official people into labor force. We have probably a couple million people that are not officially not in the labor force. So the true numbers are quite more alarming than they are. And if you cut out, if I can just add one more point, David, remember, this is with record deficit spending. So if the government cuts any deficit spending, our Canada's economy will be in full recessionary collapse. So, which is absolutely alarming considering we have one of the richest nations on earth with our resources.
You know, Daniel, what do you make of this? Because the way Mark Carney was sold to us, he was going to be our savior. He was going to be the adult in the rule. He's a genius. He was the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England governor, don't you know? And yet his apologists, after more than 100 days of doing nothing, they will say, well, come on, look at Donald Trump. He's unhinged. He's a moving target. He changes his mind every 24 hours. Well, that may or may not be true, but I'll tell you this, dozens of countries around the world, including Mexico, have struck a deal with the United States of America. If they can do it, why can't Mr. Brainiac pull off what he promised to do back in April?
Because he doesn't want to.
I agree.
I think he recognized that winning the election was incumbent upon him being positioned as the correct solution to the threat posed by Donald Trump. I think that the Conservative Party really dropped the ball, as did the media with, they'd ask one very good question of whether or not he was in conflict. It's always bothered me that he is absolutely, without a doubt, the richest prime minister in Canadian history. He has a massive stock portfolio. You tell me how someone could amass a stock portfolio that is at least in the tens of millions of dollars that would not be impacted by dropping a carbon tax completely. Unilaterally, with no parliamentary, he just signed a BS piece of paper in the office. It looked like a presidential order, held it up and went, look, no more carbon tax. And by the way, this also is definitely not impacting my stock holdings. There's no way that's possible. He ridiculed the journalist. I had a huge issue with that. The fact that no one's made more of that bothers me, but I also think the Conservatives dropped the ball with regard to the dude is Donald Trump. The guy worked on Wall Street in an investment banking firm down the street from Donald Trump's office. Why do you think Donald Trump and him get along so well? They have the same background. Yep. He's a finance bro. He is a boomer finance bro who has millions and millions of dollars. Who does that remind you of? Donald Trump. Does he want to work with Donald Trump? No, because he thinks Canada is the most European country in North America, which is one of the stupidest things he said, right along with we'll be our own customer, which is someone who owns two companies. You can't be your own customer. If I buy my own magazine, guess what, guys? I'm not making any money. And I think we're now reaping the not benefit of that, because watching him gallivant around Europe like he has for the past week, which has irked me to no end, as people can probably tell, saying, we've made a deal with Poland, we've made a deal with Germany. Great, you know what? They're very far away. Yeah. And if I want to ship product to another country, guess what's way cheaper to do? Put it on a train, put it on a truck, get it across the border. At least it used to be. But now that that relationship is getting so eroded, what are we all going to put all the volume through the ports? That newsflash, every port in Canada is basically facing an expansion project because they're already at capacity. Like, it's the most foolhardy. I don't really understand how he can be possibly misreading the situation more. And I really hope that people realize it, because what Kirk said of, if they pull the deficit spending, will be in a recession. I feel like Canada has been in a recession that has refused to acknowledge because of the immigration bolstering GDP figures falsely. We've been in it for like 2 years based on GDP per capita. We are at the critical point of, if we don't address it, because we're effectively 2 years deep in this with higher stakes than before because we have more people using our infrastructure, we're going to be in a recession unlike one we've ever seen, that I think will make 2008 look like an absolute cakewalk, because we don't really have any industry left. It's all real estate. If that starts to collapse and people stop seeing it as investment, I don't know. I think we're going to look at something more like a Greece situation than a 2008 recession. So I really hope people wake up, and I hope people start demanding more, because he should have recalled Parliament right away. He's wasting a ton of time talking to, Lithuania or whatever it was, instead of going down to the country next door that's got 400 million people that want to buy our stuff and say, hey, let's work this out. We've been best friends for like 100 years, To throw that relationship away, regardless of who is in the White House, and this is a fundamental issue that I have with Mark Carney and the way that this whole election's gone, and to a degree the way that the Conservatives handled it, to recognize that Donald Trump is the president of the United States means that when we make a relationship with the United States, it should be regardless of who the president is. Yep. It doesn't matter if it's Barack Obama, Joe Biden, George Bush, or Donald Trump. Our prime ministers should be able to recognize that the deals that we make with that country are with two countries. It's not Mark Carney's deal with Donald Trump. It's Canada's deal with the United States for all Canadians and all Americans, for our mutual benefit. It's not about their individual political stripes or their own benefits. And I think Canadians really have to start demanding that.
Daniel, I'll go one step further than what you're saying. I truly believe, and you can call me a conspiracy nut, but I think the writing is on the wall. I truly believe Brookfield Asset Management is running this company. That's the $1 trillion asset firm that Mr. Carney used to head up. I know that Mr. Carney's, the lion's share of his companies and his blind trusts are U.S. based. And now that Brookfield Asset Management is based in the U.S., and that was a Carney initiative that he lied about. He approved that last October, the 31st. Happy Halloween, everyone. Why do you want Canada to excel? You want the U.S. to excel. It's good for Brookfield Asset Management. It's good for Mark Carney. And the rest of us, we're on our way. Drea, I want to touch upon what Kirk said earlier about things getting worse. You see the unemployed masses, you see the homelessness, you see people strung out on substance abuse because of the lack of hope out there. And Drea, I think the most overlooked, underreported story of this year, we certainly reported on it, was the Privy Council report predicting in 2040, that's less than 15 years away, folks, Canada will be a dystopian society, that the rich will have either fled or live in gated communities with security guards, and the rest of us, we're forced to illegally hunt and fish and forage just for the substance of life. And I'll tell you, Drea, when I go to downtown Hamilton, when I drove past East Hastings in your city, and I'm not trying to be mean or funny, it looks like a film set for a zombie apocalypse movie. Yeah. I would argue 2040 is already here, and if it isn't, we're getting closer and closer to that. What say you, and what can we do about this?
Well, you're right. Just before the election, I was interviewing some Carney supporters at a rally and talking to them about that Privy Council prediction. And I don't think it's far off. I think if we continue under a Liberal government, it is exactly what we'll see. They also talked about the youth leaving. Well, the youth are going to have to leave if they can't find jobs. That we're going to see that. And then no one's around to take care of the elderly. This is all in there, and it's all the way that we seem to be going. As far as what's happening out here in British Columbia, I mean, the number one cause of death to our 10-year-olds is in fact an overdose. So we are in so much trouble. You talk about going down Hastings Street. Well, just a street over is Piss Street. I don't remember what the actual name is, but that's where everybody's going and using the washroom. And now, I mean, I've been here for years. Now, if you just walk on Hastings Street, you can smell that street. And I had to walk sort of down there the other day, and it was just overwhelming. We are broken. We're in a lot of trouble, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. Of course, our safer harm reduction experiment has contributed to more opioid overdoses happening. And we're seeing this start to spark up in other suburban areas, like Coquitlam has a small tent city growing that it's never had in years before. So it's definitely very grim. And I just want to circle back to one story that I cover a lot out in BC, which also, you know, when you look at Carney, you have to come to the conclusion that he doesn't want Canada to succeed. And that's actually the ostriches that the Liberals CFIA is planning to cull, despite the offers coming out of our biggest trading partner, the US. They're going to cull 400 healthy ostriches, despite a unified, nonpartisan political pushback that I've seen in Canada, then the international pushback, because these are birds that previous to having the avian flu, their eggs were being, their antibodies were being extracted from their eggs to learn how to do therapeutics for COVID-19. Now they have the avian flu. So we've been mass culling birds, 9 million in BC since 2022. And so if our Liberal government really is concerned about farms and is really concerned about these viruses and is really concerned about trade deals, then they would take the US up on this offer to send these birds to Dr. Oz, head of Medicare's farm, and collaborate with them on groundbreaking research. The US is backing away from their mRNA approach to handling the avian flu. They pulled the Moderna contract of hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're saying to Canada over and over through press conferences, their health secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr., saying, we want to work with you on these ostriches. We see something big happening, and we are not budging. We're using our tax dollars instead to continue to fight the farmers in court who are just trying to save their flock, and potentially who knows what could happen for global health.
It's unbelievable, Dre. I mean, the idea of culling these ostriches, typical liberalism, a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. They're healthy birds. But you know what, Drea, I really shouldn't be so critical, because, you know, the Liberals are all about safe injection sites, i.e. letting you poison yourself into an early grave. And if you're getting depressed and down about that, well, you know what, we got made. Why don't you just, you know, get rid of all your problems? Here's one final lethal injection. This seems to be their solution, scorched earth policy. Guys, we are rapidly running out of time. Before we wrap, Drea, do we have any super chats?
We do. I was chuckling. We were in a very deep, dark discussion about the stabbing attack, and I chuckled to myself. It wasn't because of what we were talking about. It was because of this super chat that's come in for Dan. Apparently we should have him back so he can pay the bills. Rocky Mountain Duke donates $5. Thank you very much. It says, this donation is purely for Daniel's magnificent mustache.
Wow, look at that. Well, what do you think about that, Daniel? Do you think Rocky Mountain Duke is flirting with you, or are you available on the dating world?
My wife might take issue with it, but I do appreciate the compliment.
Okay, then. Well, sorry, Rocky Mountain Duke. Daniel is not in an open marriage.
Oh, my gosh. All right. I think we could probably wrap. Should we let
I think we have something from Silverfeet.
Oh, we have another one. Okay.
Yep.
Let's hear. And Silverfeet donates $5. Thank you as well. In 11 QB ridings, the Libs won where the cons plus BQ votes were more than the Libs. 5 were, oh gosh, I am a homeschool mom, less than 5,000, right? And 6, but 1,000 and 5,000. Since NDP had bent over for Libs, should the Cons pull out of these ridings next time? Okay, I see.
No, I say no. I think that's a losing strategy. When you run in every riding possible. Forget about these, strategic voting shenanigan strategies. What say you, Daniel and Kirk?
I guess you don't have to pull out. I agree. You got to run a candidate in every riding that you can. But you can also strategically, not strategically voting, but strategically as a party, you can kind of run a candidate that may or may not win. Like, increases your likelihood. There are some where you can go, this is a losing proposition, or we want the other person to win. We're going to allocate some different resources or run a different candidate in order to help a BQ or whatever. But I kind of hope that in the next election, we look at a Conservative Party that is effectively trying to play less gamesmanship with ridings and where they win and the so-called path to victory, and instead prefers a more comprehensive perspective and tone and positions that they just go, I think Canadians can agree with, like what we've talked about. This whole conversation comes full circle to the notion that we've got a bunch of angry, young, unemployed men, because unfortunately men are disproportionately impacted by this issue. And in a country where we have growing issues with extremism, that's a very bad problem to have in concert with one another at a time when there's a huge economic crisis. So they are getting relatively desperate. What a country doesn't want is a bunch of desperate, angry, extremist young men. That's about the worst thing a country can have. So I think it's stuff like that where the Conservatives, this presser that we went back to with Poilievre this morning, making some refinements of the criminal code, that's where I think there is room for a much broader message that ties these things together, that addresses, saying the economy is tied to immigration, is tied to the violence that we're seeing, is tied to the unemployment, obviously, and bring it all together with the fact that, we do kind of need to chart a whole new course to get us out of this liberal morass that we've been in for the last 10 years.
100%. And Kirk, in less than a minute, because we're really running out of time, I kind of give this country one more election, especially now that we see so many people who are saying words along the lines of, I voted for Mark Carney, but there's no there. In other words, there seems to be buyer's remorse. Certainly the Conservatives are rising in the polls again. Maybe just having, and I got to be honest, we covered the Pierre Poilievre campaign. They say campaigns matter. He ran a great campaign. I don't care what anyone says. And don't listen to these people in the media. Oh, he's got to go more central left. Yeah, we tried that with Aaron O'Toole. Thank you very much. That was the biggest failed experiment I've seen in recent decades. So, Kirk, last word goes to you.
Yeah, my criticism of the last campaign is it was too centralized. I think they should have definitely a candidate in every single riding, and they need to be operating and have the funds to operate at a local level and reach out to as many local groups as possible and really become visible. It's part of the overall psychological conditioning. You don't want conservatives to disappear from people's lives. You want to see them and the messaging at many places as possible and as early as possible in people's lives. The reason Liberals are winning is because they're very involved with youth. There's a lot of indoctrinations in our schools. There's a lot of different organizations that promote the same ideology that the Liberal Party is promoting. Canada's future holds two issues. One is the economy, and two is the demographics. Yeah. Canadians are becoming less and less of them in different parts of Canada. So there are a lot of different parts of Canada now that have more recent immigrants in them than actual Canadians. Yeah. So as the Canadian population gets older and we can't afford to have kids, the Liberals keep mass immigrating people. So the question is, when will this intersect? Because at some point, the future generations who are not necessarily Canadian or have Canadian history or background or the same culture values will be voting for what matters to them instead of what matters to the actual country. And that will change the face of Canada forever.
And, you know, I think that was the strategy of the Biden Democrats with open borders, flood people into hopefully red states and change the demography and the quid pro quo. Hey, every 4 years, vote for the Dems. We got to wrap it here. Kirk, how do people access your content?
I guess follow me on X, on Twitter, Kirk Lubimov, and on my Substack, which is under my name as well. Thank you.
Excellent. And Daniel, I guess it's self-evident, subscribe to Calibre magazine, right?
Yeah, we've got that. We're on Twitter at Calibre Mag, and fledgling but enjoyable YouTube channel so far. So.
Okay, then. You know what I'm going to do after the show? I'm going to give my beloved Lady Menzoid a subscription to your magazine. She would, that scene you have behind you, that's her version of Martha Stewart home decor. She's getting increasingly into firearm culture. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. So I'm sure she would love your magazine. So, and continued success with it. And Drea, thank you for co-hosting. I had a great time. And I want to wish the entire panel, well, have a happy last long weekend of summer. This is the final long weekend hurrah of the summer of 2025. And I want to thank all our viewers for tuning in, especially those that gave super chats. That's how we keep the lights on. We don't get any of that Mark Carney trained SEAL media, money from Ottawa, meaning your tax dollars. So I will be back here on, well, no, I won't be. I forgot. Monday is Labor Day. And Drea, I saw you signaling me. You've got something to say?
One more thank you for Moonglow, who donates $2 and says, love these panels with Rebel. Thank you. So
nice fantastic. Ending. Well, gentlemen, there you go. The people have spoken, or a person has spoken, but I hope you'll come back in the near future. So, folks, have a great long weekend. And as always, stay safe and stay sane.
Big news, Rebel News now has premium memberships on X, Locals, and right here on YouTube. For just $4.99 a month on YouTube, you'll get loyalty badges, custom emojis, and access to members-only chats during our live streams. At $8.99 a month, you'll also unlock Rebel News Plus shows and our documentaries. But here's the catch. YouTube could cancel that premium tier at any time. That's why the best way to support us is at rebelnewsplus.com. It's just $8 a month, cheaper if you go annual, and you'll get exclusive extras like an ad-free site, comments access, and even the chance to submit op-eds. Wherever you join us, thanks for keeping our independent journalism alive and strong.